All right, so there's this group of kids, see, and they're in this car driving at night, and it's the middle of nowhere, and they come across this creepy gas station after almost running out of gas, and there's this creepy guy that runs the place, see, and he tells them about this local urban. Is everybody following this right now? There's this local urban legend, right? Okay, so they want to go check out this urban legend, but they get this flat tire. See, no one could have seen that coming. No one could have seen this flat tire coming. So right out in the middle of nowhere, they get this flat tire. No one expects it, and they get help from these really creepy rednecks. And then they get trapped in this house. See, and okay, there's these cheerleaders missing too. And it turns out that the cheerleaders are in the same house, and they're being tortured by this guy who's kind of the head of the family. And there's this weird dinner scene. And then these kids with the flat tire start getting tortured. And one of them has a cop for a dad. See, and the dad wants to know why she's missing. And then the cops show up, right? And there's this gunfight. Oh, by the way, this all takes place on Halloween too. And then there's this guy called Dr. Satan, right? And there's these really cool shots where the film is color reversed, so it looks like all those heavy metal music videos from the 90s that kind of scared the shit out of me. And then there's this tunnel under the house, right? And it just keeps going and going and going. In fact, it goes so far it ends up in another movie, like Masters of the Universe, with a Marilyn Manson sort of a vibe. But the girl survived. Oh yeah, by the way, everyone dies but this one girl, right? Okay, so she escapes. Listen, I don't want to spoil anything, but you might be surprised what happens at the end of the movie after you think this girl has finally escaped. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I'm here to tell you that this movie is a mess. An enthusiastic mess, but a mess. Rob Zombie is a talented guy, and he probably thought he'd never have a shot at making another movie so long as he lived. So he put everything he had into this one, every homage, every beloved cliche and cross-reference he could muster. He has referred to it as, quote, the Rocky Horror Picture Show meets Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That covers about the first 5 minutes of the movie. I lost count of the references early on, and frankly, I just don't have Zombie's encyclopedic knowledge of pop art, horror, and sci-fi classics. And that's the problem. Rob Zombie can't get out of his own way to just make a good film and forget the references for a bit. Nonetheless, there is good stuff. Zombie smartly kicks off the film with a murder ride, strapping the protagonist into a car moving through exhibits of famous American murders while the great Sid Haig narrates. Zombie is essentially telling us in advance what the film is we're about to watch, a compendium of murderous freak shows, and maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't take it too seriously. One scene in particular transcends the surrounding film, in which unsuspecting cops arrive at the redneck compound to discover a grisly bit of business in a locked shed. The editing here twists a typically dull scene into something genuinely disturbing, and the final shot of this sequence makes you wish there were more like it in the film. It's restrained, agonizing, and merciless. Another horrifying sequence has one of the rednecks torturing his victim while wearing the fleshy face mask of her own father, which reminded me that all the glamorous gore in the world is no good without a mean psychological twist. Zombie has a natural, unforced gift for putting his finger on the sweet spot where twin American obsessions of murder and pop art blend, and over his several films, a deeper emotional undertow has begun to reveal itself. But in his first film's throw everything at the wall approach, not enough sticks for me to make a recommendation. The sequel is a superior film that begins to reveal Zombie's latent talents, but also shows by comparison the amateurish flaws of House of a Thousand Corpses. One last thing to note, especially in reference to the last show's exploitation theme, is that Zombie is very sincere in his efforts. He is not mocking either his source material or you, the viewer. If he is an anachronism, he is honestly so and cannot be otherwise. Yes, he makes use of irony, but not condescendingly. And in steadily transcending some of his own beloved cliches, he may, accidentally or otherwise, be forming a cinematic vision all his own. So guys,
That's funny, Billy. I think that I can just replay your review from my review later. Actually, it's pretty funny, man. Not in style, but we make a lot of the same points, man. But I actually like this film a little bit better.
then The Devil's Rejects.
Yeah, just
I
because
did too.
I just felt that I know that the other one is a better shot and better produced and a little bit more confidently handled, but I guess without jumping too far ahead, I just think this one has this really giddy nature to it
Mm.
that it's really infectious a little bit more than the other one,
Mm.
and I just had I thought it was really important. You kind of touched on the haunted house ride or whatever, the Museum of Wax ride,
The
and I
murder
thought
murder
that.
ride.
Yeah, and I thought that was really important for this film. I think it's actually the backbone of it, and I think it lends the film a like a cohesion and a meaning actually without that the other one kind of lacks. You know what I mean? Like even though this one has its faults and it kind of flutters around here and there, because of that early scene with those kids in that horror ride, you know, you just have a skeleton to hang all
Yeah.
this flesh and bone on.
I
You know?
kind of agree. I just don't think that it like I'm completely cool with anything, man. Throw whatever wacky structure you want, and obviously he's running as quickly as possible through all of his, favorite. I mean, whatever idea he can come up with, he's sort of throwing at you, And I dig it, but I just don't think it works overall very well. I like there's like the problem for me is that you see, the monsters on TV, and then in the room that everyone's watching the monsters, they're all behaving like the monsters. So it's like
Yeah.
there's not enough contrast. And I think as a
Right.
filmmaker, he developed the skill to say, this is where you need to caricaturize what you're doing, and this is where you need to show restraint, so that there's a rhythm to it. And
Hmm.
you're right, it's total giddy fun, but it just has no. It's just one long. It like starts, goes nonstop, and then ends, and there's no pacing to it,
Yeah, and that's something that I noted too. But
and that's
I
just an
think
amateur. That's just an amateur mistake. Like
yeah,
it's not knowing how to pace things properly. And also, who knows? I mean, they could have. It could have been a disaster in the first cut, and there was definitely studio interference that Zombie has talked about. Whether they made it better or worse, who knows? We'll never know. But
no, I mean I made the same note for the second film in as far as lack of contrast, you know, and I think it's something that maybe it's something that does develop as you know an artist grows or whatever, and I see him making strides toward it, but I also think it's something in his music is you know I think Tom and I were
it's
talking about it
just
earlier.
one
I mean
note.
there's yeah, I mean you know so it's like
You
full
kind of get
charge
the idea
ahead.
after 10 minutes, like
Yeah.
like it's
Yep.
just yeah, it's you're kind of done with it. Um, what's interesting because you guys are talking about the two films, the second one is paced better, but is an inferior product. I feel, which is kind of odd. He definitely has a love for and a passion for horror, particularly uh, early horror. Black and white horror. I mean, the stuff that we've been discussing
Well, yeah,
recently.
everything.
Everything. The
And you both,
guy's
yeah.
unbelievable. His mind, like the references that he has, are just dazzle me. Like I could never in a million years keep up with all the things that he's referencing in those
It's
movies.
exhausting.
Yeah.
And you both mentioned the ride,
The
murder
murder ride.
ride at the beginning of the movie, and I took in the I took in the I was thinking that's what this film basically feels like. It feels like you're taking on a
Yeah,
tour through a really spooky
yeah,
spook house, that
Yeah.
existed in like Long Branch, New Jersey, in the 1980s.
yeah. I love that.
That's how I felt, and I kind of had fun with it. I kind of dug the vibe, and I
Yeah, me
didn't. And
too.
I think by him doing that right off the bat, it allowed me to not take anything too seriously. And I think he was telling me right off the bat, "Hey, you don't really look too much into this movie because I think I'm just making a
It's
fun
just
movie."
goofy. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you're gonna do that and you're gonna put a scene like that at the beginning of your movie and allow me to just be relaxed with it and not have to worry about over analyzing everything, I'm fine with that. And for that, I think that this is a pretty good movie.
I
Yeah,
I have a question, Ash. Did you get a chance to see this movie again before
Yeah, I actually saw both of these in the theater
when
originally.
they first came out?
Right, and I actually own both of them on a like a double set Blu-ray. So uh, these are movies that I actually enjoy. And again, I think I enjoyed them because the enthusiasm is inherent. If maybe
yeah,
you didn't know that it was Zombie directing these, the movies might lose a little bit of their luster. But knowing that it's him and knowing that he's one of these, he's one of the few personalities that we have left that are really sort of cheerleaders for the genre.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah.
And it sort of makes sense that we approach House of a Thousand Corpses as his fun house.
Yeah.
This
Absolutely.
is the 12-year-old kid taking you up to his room and saying, "Hey, I've got all these neat masks. I've got all these famous
Yeah.
monsters of
Yeah,
film
remember that
magazines
guy?
laying around.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll probably never lose my virginity, but I'm gonna try anyways. Maybe I'll be in a band." But sort of that kid with the first one. So, it does resonate a little more, I think, than Devil's Rejects. You have more fun with it, and you allow yourself to have fun with it because it's that cartoon vibe sort of violence, and it's the sort of the wacky Warner Brothers million miles an hour kind of violence, which is a very, very different take, obviously, than Devil's Rejects.
Yeah, you just feel him. You just feel his love, and
Yeah.
that's. I mean, you feel his love for what
It's
he's
hard
doing.
for it not
and
to
it's-
rub off on. I think that's why
exactly.
it was as successful as it was when people initially went to see it, because it wasn't just House of a Thousand Corpses; it was Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses,
Yeah.
and it had that same vibe that you come to expect from a guy who spearheads his own cause of trying to get people to love these things.
Right.
So that was a little
Yeah.
infectious.
Well, he's certainly a horror meister, and he has this whole aura of horror that surrounds him. I mean, the guy is horror. And on that note, guys, I want to ask this question: is this a scary movie, or are there any elements of scariness in this film, in anyone's opinion? Billy?
The two that I would cite, that I did cite earlier, spoiler warning, I guess, but there's the moment at the end of when the cops come up to investigate, and the one guy is sort of begging for his life, and there's just this one long extended crane shot.
Love that.
And you
That's
just
a
have
great-
no
That's awesome.
idea how the shot is going to end, and it's preceded by a music montage that works in the Clockwork Orange way, where it's sort of a cheery country ditty or something, and you're watching these horrible things edited together, and then it ends with the music fades out, soundtrack goes silent, you hear a couple of birds chirping in the trees, and this crane shot moves slowly, and this guy's holding a gun to another guy's head, and it's just like such good filmmaking all of a sudden,
Best
just
shot
out
of
of
the film.
nowhere, and it's
That's
genuinely disturbing because he forces you, and this is why he's got skills that go beyond mere fanboy filmmaking. It really disturbs you because he forces you to sit there and wait for it.
I wrote
Yeah.
down after watching that scene. I wish I was watching this in a theater, because could you imagine how
Yeah.
intense
how
that?
silent that
Yeah,
theater would be
man.
waiting. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
the second
Yeah.
was when the guy is one of the rednecks, I think the leader of the rednecks is wearing the dad's face mask, the fleshy
Mhm.
face mask,
Mhm.
and he's torturing the girl, and I'm like, that's really disturbing. Like that's a good idea. It's almost like I wish I'd thought of that idea, of this girl being tortured by this guy, and having to look at her dad's. Like it just works on a couple of different levels, and for the extreme cinema fans, it works really well. But those are the only two that I really think are disturbing. Although I remember seeing it for the first time when it was out on cable for the first time, and being pretty horrified at the early reveal scene of the human merman,
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
where you have no idea what happened to the guy, and then you find that he's been turned into
Yeah.
a P.T.
Yeah,
Barnum
that was
freak
creepy,
show.
man.
Yeah, and
But that shot.
I think that's where Zombie also really takes an exploitation angle, because as we started to move from a lot of horror films into more exploitation films, it wasn't about the horror of a creature or the horror of something lurking. It was the horror of human depravity. And I think
Yeah.
that's that angle that he really started to push, and it obviously pushed even more into Devil's Rejects.
Yeah. Does no one
Right.
else feel that, I mean, with all as much fun as everything is, that by the last, 20 minutes, it just goes completely off the rails? And
Absolutely. Like, it becomes this ritualistic thing, or I don't know what the hell he was trying to do, and that's my problem with him. And even in the Halloween movies, it's like, and Joe and I briefly talked about this earlier in the week, how he, Halloween, like the first 40 minutes are absolutely incredible, and then I'm bored. He loses me. Maybe he just doesn't know how to end a movie. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's an inherent problem or flaw with the convention of slasher movies, or some of these type of, just continual scare movies, where it isn't about the psychological horror, like Ash was saying. It becomes about the depravity of humanity. There's only one way to go with that, and is to get more and more depraved, or what we were talking about, I guess, a few episodes, where it becomes about with the human centipede, where it just becomes about the horror of repulsion and bodily and physical revulsion of something that you're seeing. So there's only so far you could go with that, and unfortunately, it seems like it's better suited for a short film, or a short feature at most, than a 2-hour Hollywood major motion picture.
Uh-huh.
Because by the end, it's like how long can you keep throwing the twigs on the fire to
Right,
keep
there's some chick
keep
running
going.
away from the killer. I mean, it's just like over and
Well, and
over and
that's
over
why,
again.
I mean, some of the best low-budget horror films are an hour and 15 minutes, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
for a lengthy film, only real filmmaking masters can pull that off, like Kubrick, Polanski, and Friedkin. I mean,
Yeah, and you'll notice that the difference with those directors is that they get inside of your head and they take the time to build, like, a Rosemary's Baby. I can't wait to do Polanski in a few weeks, but they take that time to really slowly grind you with the characters,
yeah.
and that horror starts to slowly seep in. So then when Jack Nicholson starts, running around with an axe, it's like, holy shit, you know what I mean? So
You've earned, like, the film has earned the right to that point of insanity. It doesn't start
right.
off at that level and then try to
And
keep building it up from there.
It's the same thing in any art form. It's contrast,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
I mean, there's a power in silence. There's a power in negative space. I mean, that's what it's about. Because if you could show somebody, we've been talking about this. You could show somebody getting their eyes and teeth and everything knocked out, and it's really terrible for the first 10 minutes, but then after a while, and what happens is if you precede that by, slowly working in this horror or this fear that slowly seeps into you through the characters that you're watching, then when it actually happens, it's really effective. You know what I mean? And you feel, I guess, fulfilled would be the term.
Let's talk about some of the characters in this movie, because there's quite a few of them, and a few of the actors that played them. Ash, Sid Haig, why is this man so interesting to watch on screen, man? He is something. Does he not pull you in with his presence, or what, man?
Well, he's also physically a train wreck. I mean,
He's
seeing the
so
guy at conventions, you understand why he's typecast. This is not a guy who cleans up well.
Yeah.
You don't see him suddenly in a button-down shirt and a pair of khakis, and you're thinking, "I said, hey."
Yeah, like he's ready for a champagne brunch all of a sudden.
Exactly.
He's really tall, isn't he?
He's not too tall. I mean, I think he's like 6'2", 6'3", so he's
Okay,
not like
alright.
overpowering. I think
Okay.
it's just the fact that this guy is as creepy in real life as he is in character. So when you see something like that, it's almost the same as watching something like, here's a New Jersey reference for you.
Mhm.
Watching something like Jay and Silent Bob. So when you see a guy like Jason Mewes, you automatically think this is not really so much his character, but this is a
Right.
guy who they filmed doing his thing, and then they work some gags around. And you sort of feel that way with Sid Haig too. Like you don't want to get too close to him. I mean, he's not going to physically assault you there at the convention.
Yeah.
I mean, his hygiene might, but he's not going to physically assault you. So
Right.
it's just one of those things. It's fascinating because you're looking at a guy that you don't feel has a huge separation between in his living room Sid Haig and on the set Sid Haig. He's sort of just physically, like I said, he's just a train wreck. It's an absolute
Yeah.
mess, but it's fascinating. You can't look away.
Can I jump in on that? One of the things that I really fell in love with zombies movies is the fact that he casts people who look like train wrecks, really look like train wrecks, and not some Hollywood fancy version of them.
Except
And he
his wife.
Well, even she, like, I had a crush on Sherry Moon Zombie for a very long time, but even she's not like, she's really a tough broad. Like, you get the feeling she really could kick your ass,
Yeah.
and she's not, she's not the, like, cut out of a catalog looking chick, and he shoots in locations that look genuinely filthy, that they genuinely smell bad, and there's like a dirtiness to his filmmaking that is pretty unabashed and is kind of a throwback to like real 70s filmmaking, and it just doesn't look to me like a Hollywood movie, which I really enjoy in his stuff. It looks genuinely dirty,
Yeah, which is interesting because this was actually shot on the back lot of
It
Universal.
was. And that house that they used is the same house that they used to make The Best Little Whorehouse in Texas with Dolly
Nice.
Parton. Yeah, and Burt Reynolds, I believe, was in that. So
And that somehow makes sense.
it doesn't. But Joe, you're right about that. They didn't shut down the ride, so they
Yeah.
would have to stop filming and let these people through to look
Yeah,
at the house that was used in the best little
That's
whorehouse.
great.
Yeah.
Of course it is.
And you'd kick Sid Haig off of the set if you didn't realize that he was one of the actors.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this dude. I mean, he started in the 1960s, and you know, if you look him up, I mean, he was in Batman, Star Trek, the Lucy Show,
Yeah, he's been
and then
around forever.
the Mission Impossible, and
Then he disappears.
yeah, and then I
Well,
mean,
no,
he does
he was-
TV work in the 70s because like he pops
No,
up.
he was in the exploitation films with Pam
Right,
Grier.
like he's in Foxy Brown, I believe.
and Coffee. Yeah, he
Yeah.
played the Big Birdcage and the Dollhouse. He was in the whole Women in Prison movies. He was in the blaxploitation films. He always played the heavy, usually coming in and beating people up and then getting shot in the third act. So, and he was great with Pam Grier. I seem to recall. That they actually had a pretty good working relationship. Like they enjoyed hanging out, and they'd done 4 films together at least. And yeah, so he just kind of wove his way through underground films and TV and all that.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, because he kind of just does TV work in the 80s, and then he just disappears. And then who gets him going again? In 1997, Quentin Tarantino and
Yep.
Jackie Brown. He puts him in just a quick scene. He's the judge.
Yep.
For the Pam Grier has to see the judge, and it's Sid Haig, and then Zombie resurrects him in 2003 with this film. So it's funny how both those guys, Zombie and Tarantino, both have such a love for pop culture. It's amazing.
Well, the thing about House of a Thousand Corpses, I kind of agree with you guys that it's meant to be a fun, it's meant to be a fun house ride.
Yeah.
And the I just feel like there's a better movie. I don't think Rob Zombie got the movie out of it that he wanted to get out of it. I think he had a vision and he was limited by his own skill level as a director and producer. He was limited by studio interference, and I don't think that the Funhouse movie that could have been was the one that really came out. I would like to see the one that he envisioned in his head.
Well, I think what he did was that he fought to do this, Bill, because you know what the studio wanted. You know what they wanted him to make?
I give up.
Freddy versus Jason. And he turned it down, and he got this. He went and did this. So you got to give him a little credit for at least.
No, give him a lot of credit, man. I mean, the dude's.
Thanks,
dude's pushing through his film. I mean, he's pushing through to make a film that is going to be. He knows it's not in the mainstream. He knows he's going to have trouble getting it made.
Yeah.
I mean, and he just does it by. He does it based off the reputation that he built with his film career. I'm sure it held a lot of sway, but still, man, I mean, he takes a lot of.
You mean the reputation he had with his music career?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, did I say film career?
Yeah.
But how much? I mean, how much does that transfer over to the film world? I mean, because he's a successful musician, is it really that easy to get a big film production on the ground?
No, it's not easy, but he that's the only reason why he was able to get it through. And instead of taking an easier job, he took a film that he really wanted to make, and he was vindicated eventually, especially after the fact that Universal dumped the picture.
Yeah.
They didn't distribute it. He couldn't get it out there,
And when it was finally released, it made back all of its money in one day.
That's amazing. And he's got such a great eye for casting. I could give you 2 actors that are in this film that would later go on to have great success on 2 television shows, and one is Rainn Wilson, who we all know as Dwight Schrute in The Office, and the other one played the second cop in the film. His name is Walton Goggins, and he was in probably one of the best police dramas in the history of television with Michael Chiklis, a film called The Shield. And if you really, if you ever watch this program, you would understand how intense and how of an amazing actor this guy is. And I was just blown away that both these guys pop up in Rob Zombie's little movie here, man. Mm-hmm. So he obviously, I mean, I don't know. I just see that, he has a love for cinema. It's obvious. And I think that there's there's some good things about him.
Yeah, and Billy, I agree with you, man. I mean, it's a flawed movie, and it's a little bit overzealous, I guess, at times would be the case. But the the spirit of the film carries it through for me.
Yeah.
Like it makes it a good film. It makes it a good film, even though it kind of rambles here and there, and it suffers a little bit from hyper editing in spots, and like this multimedia thing that was going on in the late '90s or whatever. Like it gets a little bit overdone in the editing room, and there's a couple of things here and there that you could nitpick at, and I mean, obviously there's not a plot, whatever, but what's happening here is like you just it's just the feel of the film. You know what I mean? Like you feel that emotion of the film, and it's coming from him, man. And it's something to be respected.
Hey, you don't have to convince me, man. I was a big Astro Creep 2000 fan, and I remember seeing my first Rob Zombie video and just thinking, what the hell am I looking at? And just having no context with which to put him into, and Hellbilly Deluxe I thought was a really badass album and everything, and I love that, but it's also it's emotionally limited, like the amount of involvement you can have in the film itself, and for me, like, it's good, and then you see kind of where he grows to, and it's interesting, there's not only talent, but there's a little bit of heart going on there too,
Absolutely.
Hey Ash, do you think that this film visually is inspired by the look of say Natural Born Killers at all? Did you see a comparison there?
I think with Zombies music, and I think he's definitely going for a visual that's probably more reminiscent of the 70s and maybe even early 80s, but I think it's near impossible with how ingrained something like Natural Born Killers gets into pop culture that you can't help but to emulate it a little bit.
Right.
And I think it suffers from that a little bit. I think that he's got this vision, but unfortunately, he's still bound by his generation and these other things that have influenced him. So as much as he wants to be referential, it still comes up as sort of being, a child of its age. And that holds it back a little bit too.
Right. And Ash, another question. Have you ever bought booze at Red Hot Pussy Liquors?
Yes, I have, actually. It's the only place I buy booze.
Hey, Ash, you're a big horror guy, and I think you'll appreciate this one. And we were talking about Sid Haig a couple minutes ago. It came down to two actors for that part. It was Sid Haig, and the other was John Polito, who played Captain Rhodes in Day of the Dead. So could you imagine if this was the case, that they didn't go with Sid Haig and they went with John Polito? It would have been such a different movie, man.
I'm just glad that they didn't cast both of those actors in Brokeback Mountain, or else it would be a bad.
Oh, totally awesome. And one last thing, Billy, about the pop culture thing, because I find this is really freaking funny, actually. Harrison Young, who plays the father in the movie in House of a Thousand Corpses, was the older version of Matt Damon in Saving
Private Ryan. Yeah.
Right, and Zombie has him wear basically the identical outfit he wore in Saving Private Ryan.
That's funny, man. Yeah. There's so many
I don't know
references.
what it means.
Maybe he was just coming over like on lunch break from shooting Saving Private Ryan, and Zombie was like, "Looks good, don't change a thing."
It's possible. And one really cool thing
was born.
One really cool thing too, and because I'm such a big Ramones fan, I was so happy to hear them pop up in the middle of the movie, which is awesome. I love hearing the Ramones, and I'm glad that he, and I'm sure he's a big fan, and he was probably obviously inspired by them musically. So it was cool to give them a little shout out in the middle of the movie. But we're going to move on to ratings in a couple minutes, unless, of course, Joe, Billy, Ash, do you want to have anything else to say about House of a Thousand Corpses?
One thing that I think is interesting to note is that, here's a 6 degrees of separation. Rob Zombie actually was a graphic designer that worked on Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah, I read that. Yeah.
Yep.
That's pretty interesting.
Going back, one other comment too was like him getting this job based off of his music career. He also directed a lot of music videos, both for White Zombie and for himself. And I don't know that he did any videos for others, but he was definitely an animator, and he's clearly really talented
I'm
visual
not
artist.
sure.
So.
Yeah, I'm not sure the name of the song, but I watched one video where he pays full homage to A Clockwork Orange. I don't know what the name of the song was, but I was reading the comment boards, and what I found really fascinating was most of his fans had no idea that what the hell Clockwork Orange was, and like
Yeah.
yeah, and but
It's funny,
but
man.
here's the cool thing is that by him doing that, I kept reading, and a lot of them are like, "Wow, I went and watched this movie. I never saw it before. It's totally awesome." And in a sense, I mean, in every sense, that's pretty fucking awesome.
Well, and his video for "Living Dead Girl" is his sort of cover of "The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari," the 1920s German expressionist film. And he's made the comment he doesn't like shitty movies, and people sort of mistake that about like think that he's one of those mystery science theater guys who just likes to watch bad movies and make fun of them and everything that we discussed last time about exploitation or faux exploitation as Joe Mummy has coined. And he says no, he likes good movies. And if you look at his references, he's actually referencing like all the characters in House of a Thousand Corpses and Devil's Rejects are named after Groucho Marx characters. And he's clearly a fan of good filmmaking, and he's for my money, and this is the redeeming factor of House of a Thousand Corpses, he's a genuine exploitation filmmaker in that he's genuinely trying to make a good film. He's not trying to
That's
condescend.
exactly what we were talking about last time.
He is limited by his budget, by his skill level, by his actors, by everything. But he's not trying to make a shitty movie. He's trying to make a good movie.
Right, and that's what comes across. But it was funny when you said Clockwork Orange, Tom, and I actually picked up a collection of his comic books in preparation for this, The Adventures of El Super Beasto. And one of the plot lines is the heroine gets lost in a jungle on her way to save the Mexican wrestler superhero, and gets attacked by a group of zombie werewolves who are all dressed like Alex and his droogs, and they talk throughout the whole plot line in Anthony Burgess's what does he call it? Something speak. What is he? The language that Anthony Burgess invented for Clockwork Orange. And one of the lines is, "If you don't know what they're saying, then you better catch the fuck up really quickly." So he's like pushing it, and that comic book thing, which actually relates to this. Dr. Satan is actually one of the first villains in his comic book series, and one of the first issues there. So it's coming directly from that, and it's just funny that he not only is he doing the music and the film, but also this comic book. And you could see, I was actually watching some of his videos earlier, a lot of the comic book stuff is popping up in his videos, and so there's all this cross hybrid stuff going on, and in his music video for was it Thunder Kiss 65? There's a Mexican wrestler in a car, and he's just inventing this whole world, and
it's great, man. It's
really
like this
fun, man.
Cyclone of energy coming out of the guy,
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to watch him just really you just sense that he gets giddy doing it, and just that he can remain passionate about it in the face of record moguls and Hollywood executives.
Well, he has to get that from his parents. I mean, his parents were carnival workers.
Yeah, right.
So I mean.
But he also said in an interview, something that I just think it's a cool comment is nothing. Very rarely does anyone who comes from a perfectly happy childhood ever want to produce they are not driven to produce, and the more fucked up your childhood is, the more you have something to prove, and you could tell. I mean, the guy's obviously got some demons and everything, and I really love it, and this is, I think, kind of why I like Devil's Rejects a little bit better, is he's surrounded himself with pop culture iconography that relates to, a lot of pain and suffering and all of that, but his exuberance shines through, and it transforms it and it makes it into something really fascinating,
Yeah,
this is a kid who sat in front of the TV a lot.
Yeah,
and you can tell that when he produces, this is sort of that kind of fever dream. It's very manic, but it contains all these elements that have been running through his head for the last 35, 40 years.
It's almost Andy Warhol like the way he takes familiar things and just blows them out and turns them into surreal montage. He's really talented pop artist.
I mean, in this movie, he'll take like a cereal and call it Agatha Christie's. I mean, seriously, I mean, it's nuts. I mean, he's really, I mean, it's amazing what this guy's.
Yeah, he's also, that just shows he's got that Mad magazine sort of wry sensibility and humor underlying everything as well,
Yeah, definitely. Hey, guys, let's move on and get to some ratings for House of a Thousand Corpses. And like always, I'm going to start with our very special guest, Mr. Ash Hamilton. Ash, what do you rate in House of a Thousand Corpses?
I'm going to go high on these. I'm going to go high on House of a Thousand Corpses just because it is an homage and it's so referential. We're working on a 5-star system, right?
Yes.
I'm going to give it 3.
Wow. All right, good. Very cool. Billy?
3 stars. Solid 3 stars.
I like it. Mr. Joe Mummy.
Yeah, 3 for me too, man. I mean, it's almost great, or almost really good, but solid 3 for me.
I wrote down 3.5. I'm gonna stick with it. I'm not gonna pull a Max and go, well, since you guys rated it 3.
Hi, Max.
I'm just gonna go down, and it sucks because Max loves Rob Zombie, and I'm gonna give this 3 stars.
Now, I can only take back my 2 for Texas Killing Fields. God damn it.
I have to learn how to do an impression of Joe, doing an impression of Max, doing an impression of Tom, and then Tom, you have to learn me, and it'll come all full circle, and the universe will explode.
See, that's when you've got good radio, is when it gets self-referential.
Yeah.
Guys, thanks for reviewing House of a Thousand Corpses. We're going to move on to the second part of our classic review theme tonight, as Mr. Joe Mummy gives you his introduction to The Devil's Rejects. Joe, get it done.
I overheard Dr. Zoomer say he needed a couple of men to accompany his mummy back to the States.
Is she afraid to travel by herself?
She? No. His mummy is a he. What's wrong with that? Some mummies are men, some mummies are women.
It's a strange country.
What's strange about it, Lou?
Your mummy, wasn't she a woman?
I never had a mummy.
What's your father do, win you in a crab game?
I said stop that nonsense.
You are now with the spirit of the dead, with Joe Mummy.